pattern with them robbing them.
When the police matron examined her, it was discovered that the lady was a man. Here we see him removing her wig.
You call that a concealed weapon? You think you can hold me on this?
Why were you with us last night?
Last night while I was home, shucking oysters.
Who's on here, Charlie?
Who knows? The wife said she didn't come home all night.
She didn't come home all night. She don't know what she's talking about.
Listen, buddy, I happen to be a personal friend of Charlie's when you see, and he ain't gonna like it.
Raymond Fitch, laundry attendant, 1940, petty larceny, 30 days. 1943, petty larceny, 90 days. Shall I go any further?
This mugger worked the parks, preying on courting couples. His tools of the trade were gloves, a gun, and iron bars. Around his shoes, he had blocks of wood wrapped in cloth to make him look taller as he approached the couples to rob them.
Hey!
Here he comes. What's the dope, Frankie? Give us a break, will you? Yeah, what'd he say?
The ones that cover up their faces are the fences, Fagans, and jewel thieves, punks and small timers. They start crying and pleading with me not to take their pictures, as their poor mothers will see it and it will break their hearts. I disregard their pleas and crocodile tears. Murders were messy and ugly. People had seen too many gangster movies, but at $5 a bullet, they were good payers. This was a friendly game of bocce, an Italian game very popular on the East Side and played on empty lots. An argument started and one of the players was shot and killed. The dead man's wife arrived and then collapsed. A woman relative cried, but neighborhood dead-end kids enjoyed the show when a small-time racketeer was shot and killed. Here he is as he was left in the gutter. He's got a DOA tied to his arm. That means dead on arrival. This man was booked for pouring kerosene on his wife, locking her in a bathroom, then setting her afire. This elderly man had a room. So he knifed her to death. Cover up as he. This 16-year-old boy strangled a 4-year-old child to death. The parade never ceases. Murderers, pimps, and pushers, the newspapers love them. Gangsters aren't so bad. I figured that each time I photographed a dead gangster, it was in the nature of a slum clearance. For over 10 years, I made a lush living covering murders from Manhattan Police Headquarters. Over 5,000 murders, at least one every night. Many of the guys were my buddies. Dutch Schultz, he always got a headache when he was arrested, and I always carried aspirin for him. Jack Legs Diamond, another favorite of mine, a real gentleman. He'd been shot so many times that he was called the human sieve and had to carry an umbrella. Mad Dog Vincent Cole, who killed just for the sheer joy of killing. Waxy Gordon, the dope king. I was friend and confidant to all of them. For me, crime had paid in a very big way. From 2 to 3, The radio pumps out auto accidents and fires, routine coverage that the cops had learned how to handle when they were still rookies at the police academy. I called these assignments sudden death. Sudden death for one, sudden shock for the other. Brakes that fail. Kids on a joyride. Hit and runs. When a 5 alarmer goes, I get there quick. People were counting and neighbors who had gotten out. I stayed close. His aide came out and said, "It's a," meaning that someone had been burned to death. A mother with a shawl around her was clinging to one of her daughters and looking up at the building. Another daughter and a younger child, a baby, were burning in the ashes. I cried when I took that picture. It was an image that was to haunt me the rest of my life. I was raised in those lousy, fire-trapped tenements. I just couldn't escape them. One hall toilet for 4 families, cold water, dirt, and disease. Our first 2 rooms over a bakery were as hot as a furnace in hell. $12 a month. But who had that kind of money? My folks were janitors. They cleaned and scrubbed the stairs, put out the garbage, and fought with the tenants for the landlord's rent, which was never ready on time. I pay $17 a month for this room opposite police headquarters. A bed, a dark room, teletype machine, cigars, coffee, and papers. What more could I want? As kids, we had a lot less. We came through Ellis Island in '09. The $20 my father had was enough to convince the authorities that we would not become public charges. He signed it. We were Americans. My father did badly as a wage earner. He was very pious and would not work on the Sabbath. But that made it very difficult for him to hold down a steady job. I left school at 14, left home, worked as a candy peddler, street ad man, busboy at the automat, and anything else I could find. Slept rough and was broke. I didn't have a nickel to my name, but I was a free soul with no responsibilities. When I joined the Acme News Services in '23 as a darkroom man, I was happy for the first time in my life. The smell of developing and hypochemicals was intoxicating. I learned photography in that darkroom. History passed through my hands. Fires, explosions, collisions, gang wars, murders, kings, presidents, everybody famous and everything exciting that turned up in the 20s. I handled the first flash bulb produced by General Electric to take the place of the dangerous. Photography was growing up, and so was I. After 12 years in the red and yellow, I quit and went freelance. 2 years later, I got my press card, bought a car, got a police radio, and started cruising the nights. No more searching for nickels in the telephone booths. I was on my way.
No,
4 o'clock was trouble. The bars would close, and the boys were mellowed by drink, refusing to leave. They're having a good time. Why go home to their nagging wives? 4 o'clock means frigid air and resentment. The boys in blue would arrive and escort them out. People often ask what kind of candid camera I use. Well, there is really no such thing. It's the photographer who has got to be candid. The trick is to be where the people are. That, and to get in close. I take all my pictures on a 4x5 speed graphic camera. I work alone, and I don't use extension lights, tripods, exposure meters. I haven't got time for gadgets because all my energy is concentrated on the drama taking place before my eyes. Here's my formula, dealing as I do with human beings, and I find them wonderful. I leave them alone and let them be themselves, holding hands with love light in their eyes, sleeping, or merely walking down the street. To me, a photograph is a page from life, and that being the case, it must be real.
my head is not in the sky. My heart does not stand still, just hear it beat.
These are men arrested for dressing as girls. The cops, the old meanies, broke up their dance and took them to the pokey. The evidence, the gay deceivers.
And feel a beat so well.
on, get the lead out.
After 5 came the most tragic hours of all. They would be at their lowest mental and physical state, and finally take a dive out the window. I never photographed a dive. I would drive by. It's a funny thing, but when a woman jumps out of the window, nature is usually very kind. When she lands on the sidewalk, one shoe off, there won't be a mark on her face. The cops would cover her body with newspapers. I couldn't take it. I was finished for the night. For over 10 years, night after night, my routine was the same. Never changing, never ending. People kept telling me that my pictures should be a great social document. As I keep to myself, belong to no group, like to be left alone with no axe to grind, I wouldn't know. But they did seem to form a pattern. So I pasted them into a dummy and left them with the publishers with a note. For over 2 years, I made the rounds of publishers, and for over 2 years, they all rejected it. When it was published, it was very successful, and they ran to 3 editions within a few months. I was made. I caught the New Yorkers with their masks off, not afraid to laugh, cry, or make love. What I felt, I photographed, laughing and crying with them. I parked my car and cut the wires to the police radio. I was through with the newspaper game, through with chasing ambulances to scenes of crime and horror. I was saturated with the tears of women and with children sleeping on fire escapes. Now, I could really photograph the subjects I liked. I was free. Usher Fellig was the local boy made good. WEEGEE had become famous. This is Arthur Felton, New York's most remarkable police beat photographer. Associates call him WEEGEE after the psychic Ouija board because he is first on the scene of the crime or accident more often than any other news cameraman. This reputation is Mr. Fellig's source of livelihood. From a $17 a month room littered with a police radio, cigar boxes full of negatives, cardboard cartons containing flash bulbs and shoes, a dingy double bed in which he sleeps with his clothes on, WEEGEE roams off nightly in a rickety 38 Chevy coupe to cover fires, accidents, and violent death. A bachelor, he works from midnight to 6 a.m., detests telephones, keeps his savings in the back of his car, and manages to get his laundry done once a month. His work is his whole life. When he wants to relax from taking pictures of cops and robbers, he goes to a G-Man movie. Swarthy, pleasant, uncultured, he loves his work and even likes the people he photographs. He thinks murderers, they rarely give a cameraman trouble.
There came a time when WEEGEE, using the press camera with flash, realized that he boosted into incredible prominence some perpetrator, some gangster, some sort of a crime. He boosted him into the daily newspapers and the headlines, and that this kind of ephemeral fame that he gave to these people could be transferred to himself and made more permanent. That WEEGEE himself could become the kind of subject matter of the photographs.
When you have a book come out, you got to have a lot of interviews. In 1945, the first interview had to be with Mary Margaret McBride on NBC. If you weren't on her program first, you were a dead duck. She was a real doll and really plugged the book.
This is NBC, the national broadcasting company.
1 o'clock, and here transcribed is Mary Margaret McBride.
You are going to love Naked City. It's published, by the way, by Dual Sloan Pierce under their Essential Books.
That's right.
And it's worth every nickel you'll ever pay for it, because some of the pictures are like nothing else you've ever seen. I've never seen photography like some of this. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's ugly, it's sad, it's funny.
Don't forget, it's human.
It's human.
The people
That's
of
the
New
word.
York, exactly as I and others have seen it.
This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
This is KROD.
This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Once a year, genius. In 1945, when Naked City came out, it was my turn. I was compared to Shakespeare, O. Henry, Hemingway, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and even WEEGEE. Assignments poured in from Life, Vogue, and Bazaar. My fee shot up from $5 to $500 a picture. And the portals of society opened suddenly before me. Money, fan letters, dates, things I wanted all my life. No matter where I went, I wasn't allowed to pay for anything. Food and drinks were all on the house. My subjects and I were really having a good time.
He was completely self-educated, and as time went along, he changed his attitudes, he's changed his name, and he grew with the photography. The photography fed with him, and then he fed back into the photography. So that from one moment to the next, you can see the growth of WEEGEE through the photographs itself. What makes is that he had an incredible lust of some kind to have power over people as he photographed. For example, he only seemed to photograph people when they were blown out of their minds, senseless, fraught with anxiety, unable to control themselves. At that specific moment, he would move in and grab photos of them in the most extraordinary way.
The 30 inside crime, someone acknowledged station. We only inside crime, someone.
There was a demonic edge to WEEGEE, which gave power to his photographs, so that we, the audience, are sucked into this distasteful and horrid subject matter, this ghastly subject matter. And we get the same kind of thrill that WEEGEE got in viewing it. He had an instinct for voyeurism. And by voyeurism, I mean getting some kind of a kick out of violence and death itself. And another aspect of voyeurism, of getting sexual kicks out of watching other people's involvement with sex. And he obviously considered it and was conscious. And with infrared photography, people have no idea they're being photographed. He began in the movie houses. He went in and he photographed young kids picking their noses, sucking ice cream, and then lovers in the movie houses, sort of shamelessly entwined, making love to one another, and then down to Coney Island. And there's one remarkable photo where he watches a woman sitting alone on the Lifesavers Tower, listening to the cries of people making love on the beach around him. And WEEGEE, the voyeur, catches the voyeur.
Ah, love, you've found me at last. In my heart there's a song. I dreamed of love in the past. I have waited for you so long. For love everlasting. Now my dreams will come true.
There's an undercurrent, a high expressive undercurrent with WEEGEE of revealing truths, ironically, if you like, about people. And at the same time, one senses that he relishes the experience that he's undergoing.
In those days, I was very hungry for love. I still am. So you know what I do? I take off my shoes and socks, go on the beach at Coney Island, and prowl around the love-making couples with infrared light. I'd photograph. I always knew there was a couple there by a cigarette light, because after making love, couples are exhausted, so they smoke. I knew that even then.
He was not considered at all in his lifetime as a serious artist. They had to wait until almost a decade after his death for people to begin to realize that WEEGEE was indeed a serious artist, and the nature of his artistry was that, unlike any other photographer, he seemed to tell it as it is, as life really is in the raw, in a way that no other photographer quite had. WEEGEE's interest in how people really are is absolutely apparent in the photographs. His subject matter